others. First, we have Margie Parrott and Nicole Sheppard to tell us about the transition process, especially in this time of COVID. Their email addresses for personal questions are in the chat. And again, you may post general questions in the Q&A. Margie is an extraordinary specialist in transition with MCPS, where she has also been a transition teacher and a special education teacher. Also presenting today is Nicole Sheppard, the incomparable transitioning youth coordinator for the Southern region of DDA, the Maryland Developmental Disabilities Administration. Margie and Nicole, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Karen. Thank you very much for that introduction. Thank you. As Karen mentioned, I'm Margie Parrott, and I'm with the Transition Services Unit for Montgomery County Public Schools. I'm going to talk a little bit today about transition services from high school and beyond. So I'm going to start with, what are transition services? The legal definition from the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, transition services are a coordinated set of activities designed with an individual, designed for a student receiving with an individual education program. The activities are focused on improving the academic and functional achievement of the child, and they're there to facilitate the child's movement from school to post-school life. So in a nutshell, transition services give students and families the necessary resources to move from high school to whatever it is the student wants to do after high school. In Maryland, transition services begin at age 14. So if the student wants to go on to post-secondary education or employment or adult services, whatever that student wants to do, transition services help get that student there. And transition goes throughout high school. It's not a one-time process. It is every year. It's a collaborative process. Parents are involved, the special education team at the school is involved, and the student is involved. The student is the key decision maker. The student is encouraged, starting at age 14, to be a part of this transition process. It's their interests, their preferences. They are the ones that are driving the transition services. And in each high school and special school in Montgomery County, we have a transition support teacher. And it's that transition support teacher that helps facilitate that transition from high school to the real world. And then depending on what the student wants to do, they may receive instruction in social skills training, self-advocacy, independent living, job training. So it really depends on the student's outcomes and their areas of interests. When we're talking about outcomes, the students are either going to be earning a Maryland high school diploma or a Maryland high school certificate of program completion. In MCPS, the diploma requirements are the student has to earn at least 22 credits. They have to be enrolled at least 4 years beyond the 8th grade. They have to pass the Maryland State assessments, and then they need to earn a minimum of 75 student service learning hours. And in terms of those 22 credits, the students are expected to get 4 credits in English, 4 credits in math, 3 credits in science and social studies, a fine art credit, a tech ed credit, a PE credit, a half of a health credit, and then the rest of the credits are foreign language, a program completer, or electives. And within that 22 credits, when I say a student needs to earn 4 math credits, Students in MCPS are expected to take a math class all 4 years of high school, even if by their senior year, they've already completed those 4 math credits. To earn a certificate, a student, again, has to be enrolled in an educational program for 4 years beyond the 8th grade. And the IEP team will determine with the parents, has that student developed the appropriate skills for the individual to enter the world of work, act responsibly, and the instruction within that area would be in getting a job. Perhaps a student is interested in going to a college program. Perhaps they're interested in doing supported employment. So what the student's going to be working on, if they're getting a certificate, will be more functional instruction. So also, a student has to be enrolled in an education program for 4 years beyond the 8th grade and will have reached the age of 21 before or on the first day of the next school year. So how is that diploma or certificate decision made? It's an IEP team decision, and the IEP team has to consider realistic outcomes for the student. Is the student going to be able to pass the Maryland state assessments? Is the student going to be able to earn the 22 credits? So this is a decision that the IEP team has to make, and they typically make this decision if there is a choice between the certificate and the diploma, then this decision is made in the student's beginning of the student's last year of high school. I was talking about this a little earlier. If a student is getting a certificate, what is their programming going to look like? What is their instruction going to entail? So those students are working on alternate learning outcomes, and this is a limited sample of the grade level content, and it's typically modified to represent the grade level content, but it's not the full grade level content. So the students are working on the alternate learning outcomes. Students are doing community-based instruction. Students are working out in the community, site-based work experiences. And then with everything they're doing, special educators are embedding social skills and self-advocacy instruction. What are the options for students after high school? Are they going to go to college? Are they going to get a job? What is that going to look like? One thing that you have to consider, in Maryland, a young adult with a disability who is receiving special education is entitled to a free and appropriate education through the school year in which the student turns 21. This is the law, and this is the entitlement. Once a student exits the school system, they go from an entitlement to an eligibility. Services. Services are, they have to be found eligible for services. Sorry. So when they're in school, that is an entitlement. Anything that a student wants to get either from a post-secondary environment, from adult services, any of those services after graduation, a student must apply and be found eligible to receive those services. And in addition to being found eligible, the funding sources have to be in place in order to receive those services. If a student does decide to go to high school, there are some differences between college and high school. The biggest difference, there are no IEPs in college. Once a student turns 18, the parents are no longer the ones that the school comes to. The student gains those rights, and this is under the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. So it's the student that, when they go to college, the college communicates with the students. If the student wants services from Disability Support Services, the student has to provide the documentation to apply for those services, and the student has to disclose their own disability. So the parents cannot go into the college and disclose the disability for their child. The student needs to do this. It's the student that is going to be collaborating with their professors and their instructors, and the student really needs to tell the instructor or the college what they need. The Disability Support Services Office will look at a student's accommodations on their IEP, and if the student is found eligible, they can adhere to some of those accommodations. And again, a post-secondary environment is an eligibility-based environment. It is not an entitlement. Some of the expectations if a student goes on to college, the students are expected to navigate the campus independently. And this, if it's a program for students with intellectual disabilities on a college campus, these expectations are still the same. Students are expected to attend classes. They have to follow the campus's code of conduct. Again, the students are communicating with their instructors. Students have to be able to problem solve. It's really important if a student is going to go onto a college campus that they understand their disability and they are able to advocate for themselves so they know when to ask for that assistance. Some of the other things that the transition support teachers do, they link students to adult services. And some of these adult services can include the Division of Rehabilitation Services, Behavioral Health Administration, the Maryland Department of Labor, and the Developmental Disabilities Administration. Before MCPS transition teachers can refer a student to any agency, any of the agencies listed, we have to receive consent from the parents. Before we can speak to an agency, before we can provide any documentation to an agency, before we can invite anyone to an IEP meeting, the school team, the IEP team has to receive consent from the parents. And this is a signed consent form that we have in MCPS. That signed consent is good for a year from the day it is signed. And we have to have this consent before any referrals or discussion or documentation can be made or passed on to any agencies. So one of the first agencies that we refer students to is the Division of Rehab Services, DOORS. And DOORS is all about employment. They offer programs that individuals with disabilities can go into so they can get a job, they can learn skills for a job. Students are typically referred to DOORS by the transition support teacher when they are in high school. Again, with that consent, students can refer themselves, family can refer their students for vocational rehab services. And if the transition support teacher does that, then it's done the year prior to the student's graduation. Again, the DOORS services are not an entitlement. There's an application process and students have to be found eligible. For more information on DOORS, there is going to be a DOORS webinar today on this same Zoom link at noon. So please tune in for that to get more information on DOORS. And we also refer students to the Behavioral Health Administration. This is typically for students that have some behavioral health issues or some addiction issues. And it's through local agencies, the local behavioral health administrations, where they have programs for psychiatric inpatient care, residential treatment, crisis services, family supported services, supported employment. These are all for anyone with a student who may have a mental health issue. There are some programs specifically for transition-aged youth that are available in some regions. We typically work with Cornerstone Montgomery in MCPS. And also today at 1:30, there will be a mental health resources webinar. So that would be on this same Zoom link. So please tune into that for more information about behavioral health. There's also the Maryland Department of Labor. And the Maryland Department of Labor has programs and services to help young adults reach some education and employment goals. The Maryland Department of Labor services are not specifically for students with disabilities. It's for anyone. They do have some local job centers that do have some youth services programs. Our local job center is WorkSource Montgomery, and they have a youth services division. It does serve students with and without disabilities, ages 14 to 24. WorkSource Montgomery has a young adult opportunities program. This is in their Wheaton office. Here are a couple of resources that I've listed for the Maryland Department of Disabilities, the Maryland Higher Education Commission, Montgomery College Disability Support Services, Maryland State Department of Education, DOORS, and DDA. Here is the contact information for myself and Ms. Simone Guinness, the Supervisor of Transition Services. And another agency that we work very closely with and we refer a lot of our students to is the Developmental Disabilities Administration. So I'd like to introduce Ms. Nicole Sheppard. She is the Transitioning Youth Coordinator at DDA for the Southern Maryland Regional Office.
Hello and good morning, everyone. I am going to try and share my screen so you guys can see the presentation. So hopefully, because I can see you guys, Margie, can you tell me, can you see my presentation? Am I sharing my screen? Everybody can see it?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So good morning. As Ms. Parrott stated, I am Nicole Sheppard. I am the Transitioning Youth Coordinator for the Southern Maryland Regional Office for the Developmental Disabilities Administration, DDA. So I know a lot of you have probably heard about DDA, and the school systems normally like, have you applied for DDA and things of that nature? And a lot of you are probably wondering, well, who is DDA and what do they do? I'm going to explain that to you today. So DDA, Developmental Disabilities Administration, we provide funding for people with developmental disabilities. We partner with people and their families to provide leadership and resources to enable people to live a fulfilling life. DDA is definitely guided by the principle that people with developmental disabilities have the right to direct their lives and services. So we want to make sure that your loved ones remain at the center of the plan. So with that being said, we do not do the hands-on day-to-day with your loved ones, but what the DDA does, we're going to pay for it all in layman's terms. So when you think of DDA, kind of think of me as our money to pay for those services that your loved one may need. So our application process, you can retrieve our application online on our website. What we'd like you to do is to fill out the application, and we want you to include supporting documentation. It is going to be the most recent psychological. Normally the school system does that, so it's important to keep that paperwork that the school system gives you. We also want you to include the most recent IEP, your individual educational plan, and any medical documentation that you may have from a doctor, just stating the needs of your loved one or what their disability is. Okay, so once you submit that application to our office, we will then refer the application out to do what we call a comprehensive assessment, a CA. So normally a CA is an in-person interview, but due to the pandemic, they are doing Zoom meetings, or we are doing those meetings over the phone as well, just to get a better understanding of the applicant applying. And why this is important is because we know that the same way someone looks on paper may not be the same way they present in person or other things. So it's important that we have both. So what happens is it's going to be completed by a coordinator of community service, and I will go into what those are later. And they have 45 business days to complete that, and they're going to complete that CA with you and with your loved one to get a better understanding, and they're going to turn that into the Developmental Disability Administration Office, the Southern Maryland Regional Office. What happens is our eligibility team will review the CA, they'll review the application, and they are going to make the determination as to whether the applicant meets our criteria or not. So please note that the determination is made by the DDA organization. So what are we looking for with that eligibility criteria? So according to COMAR, so COMAR are the state regulations for Maryland. According to COMAR, a developmental disability is a physical or mental impairment, but not just mental illness, or it can be a combination of mental and physical impairments. What this means is someone who is simply diagnosed with ADHD, which is seen as like a mental impairment, would not qualify for these services, or someone who is solely diagnosed with bipolar would not qualify for our services. If you are diagnosed with multiple things, but a developmental disability that affects you cognitively is the leading factor, you may qualify for our services. So we're looking for something that is more likely to continue forever. We're also looking for something that had an onset before the age of 22. This is why it is important to keep the documentation that the school gives you, because the dates on that lets us know someone's age and if they had an onset before the age of 22. And we're also looking for someone who would need the supports or assistance to live independently, and someone who would need the support of a team to help with your services and treatment. So this is a very long, drawn out definition. If you want to look in COMAR 102212, I put that down there. You can definitely look that up, but I just wanted to kind of condense it for you guys. That's our eligibility criteria, and that's what we're really looking for someone. So I know a lot of you may have already applied for DDA, and you might be on the waiting list. DDA works when you're seen eligible for our services. We work in priority categories. A lot of you have probably heard of the autism waiver, and you can call the autism waiver and ask them, hey, where am I at on the list? And the autism waiver can tell you you're 395, you're 402, you might be 295 on the list. DDA works in priority categories. So even though we have a waiting list, we can't tell you kind of what number you are because of our priority categories. So there are 3 priority categories for DDA funding. 90% of our people, I'm going to start at the bottom, is number 3, current requests. These are people that need and want services, but health and safety are not immediate needs. So probably about 90% of our people are in that category. Category 2 means crisis prevention. That means you'll be in a health or safety crisis within the next year, or if you have a caregiver 65 or older, you automatically go in crisis prevention. Crisis resolution means you are currently in a crisis or emergency situation. For example, someone who's being abused or neglected at home, or someone who is in a home and that is abusing other people. So how DDA works is depending on the day, depending on what's going on in everyone around the state's lives, your number, you could be moving. So it's hard for us to say what number you are, but we can tell you what priority category you are. Currently right now, DDA is funding just the crisis resolution category. So other people are still on the waiting list if you're in the crisis prevention or the current request. So this can also change depending on your situation. Like I said, it's fluid and people are moving daily. So some of you are probably wondering, well, I'm not in a crisis, so how do I get services with DDA? Little bit of a loophole, I call it. The Governor's Transitioning Youth Initiative is something that was established years ago. What was happening is that people were coming out of school, the school systems were doing so much for your loved ones and they were helping them build skills. We were noticing that people were sitting at home on the waiting list, waiting to get into services, and the skills were kind of diminishing. If you don't use it, you lose it, right? So the Governor's Transitioning Youth Initiative is an initiative that allows students who are coming out of high school that need to go in adult service to kind of skip that line and go right into adult services instead of sitting at home and waiting to get services. So we want to keep everything progressive. So the GTYI funding is for a person with developmental disabilities as defined in the regulations I stated earlier. So you're eligible for funding after school eligibility. These are specially dedicated funds that are reauthorized each year by legislature. As Margie stated before, DDA is not an entitlement. While you're in school, you're entitled to so many different things by having a disability. Once you come over into the adult services world, post-school, you have to be eligible for things. So with DDA, as long as you have a need and we can show that it's a documented need for a service, we have no issue providing it. So it's more of a, let's see if you're eligible, you're not just entitled to these things. So I know I discussed coordinators of community services. There's a lot of information that I'm going to give you. Your coordinator of community service, your CCS, is going to be there to help you along the way. The CCS, I like to think of them as an extension of DDA. There are eyes and ears out there. So they're going to assess your loved one's wants and needs post-school or during services. They're also going to coordinate and connect you to adult services. I know you're going to hear from some different service providers today. So your CCS is going to be there to help you along the way through all of this. They're going to assist you with identifying providers. They're also going to complete the paperwork for waiver enrollment. They're going to develop the person-centered plan, which is a PCP. A lot of you are used to the IEP from school. The PCP, DDA does a PCP, a person-centered plan, yearly. Instead of just focusing on educational goals, it's going to focus on all around goals, any goals that your loved one may have. So your coordinator monitors the implementation of the PCP, and they also monitor your satisfaction with services. If you're not satisfied with services, we're going to see what we can do to maybe do something better, and maybe to switch a provider, to switch something out, or maybe try something new. So your CCS is going to make sure that everything's going smooth. They're going to coordinate the annual review of the PCP and update it. They're also going to advocate for your loved one and assist them with self-advocacy. As I stated before, we believe that people with developmental disabilities have the right to guide their own life. So your CCS is there to make sure that your loved one remains the center of the plan. We always want to make sure that that person remains the center of the plan, okay? They're also going to assist with locating and implementing generic resources in the community. DDA refers to generic resources as things that you can get that we don't necessarily have to pay for. So if you need help applying to Medicaid, if you need help applying for Social Security, if you need help applying to DOORS, I know you're going to hear from DOORS later. If you need assistance with maybe summer camp funding or things like that, we do offer, just help applying to those different resources within your community. So your coordinator is kind of like their case management, and they're going to make sure that everything is flowing smoothly for you so that it's a cool, seamless process for you, as seamless as possible. So in Montgomery County, you have a choice with CCS agencies. Some of you may have seen these names. So on this screen is just the list of coordination agencies that are servicing Montgomery County right now. I normally get asked all the time, which one's the best? So I will say that they're each mandated by DDA guidelines and regulations, which are done by the federal government as well. So it is really your choice as to who you want to work with. They're not any different, really. So, but please note that if you pick one, you can either switch agencies. I don't want you to think you're locked into anyone. If things aren't working out with that agency, you can definitely email our office and we can switch CCS agencies for you. So as I said, on this screen are a list of the service providers in Montgomery County. So options for GTYI funding. Now you're probably asking well, what services do you guys pay for? What are you offering? So DDA has meaningful day services. We have day and employment services. We also have self-directed services and support services. And I'm going to go over each briefly. So under our meaningful day services, under our day category, we have day habilitation. And these are services that are intended to increase independence and develop and maintain motor skills, communication skills, personal hygiene skills, things of that nature related to specific habilitation goals that are hopefully going to help with opportunities for integrated employment. So that's one service. We also have community development services. These are activities that assist with developing the skills and social supports necessary to gain and retain employment. So people who normally are volunteering someplace, we'll normally go into our CDS services. We're trying to help you maintain those skills needed for integrated employment. There's also career exploration. This is a time-limited service that helps participants learn skills to work toward competitive and integrated employment. So this is just something that kind of help people get those skills. Almost think of it almost like an internship or a brief thing to kind of help those skills to help with maintaining or getting employment. We also have meaningful day services under employment. So please note that Maryland is a employment first state. We're not saying that everyone has to work. What we are saying that everyone who wants to should have the ability or the right to. So what this means is DDA is fully committed to, no matter what someone may need on the job, we're fully committed to giving those supports or paying for those supports for that person. With that being said, there might be some people that may work and they might need a one-to-one staff to complete tasks daily. As long as they can work and they want to work, we're willing to provide the support for that and fund that so that the person can work. So under employment services, we have employment discovery and customization. So these are time-limited services, and these are normally done to identify a customized employment option for participants and work toward competitive integrated self-employment. We also have discovery, and this is a process to assist the participant in finding out who they are. There are sometimes people will come out of school and they're like, well, I want to work and I can work, but I don't really know what I want to do or what my skill set is. That's fine. The discovery process is going to help the provider tack into, let's see what your skills are. Let's see what you're good at. It's almost like I like to think of this also as an internship. We're going to put you in different environments so that we can see what skills you have and what we can do. Job development. After we've figured out what your skills are, let's find out what job kind of goes toward those skills. So this is going to be supports in finding a job, including customized employment and self-employment. So what this means is if you had to go through the discovery process, we know what your skills are. Let's figure out where we can tap those skills into and what job may be best with those skills. So from there, we'll go with job development, support in finding a job, including customized employment. So now with those skills, we're going to try to get you out there, find a job, get things going for you. With ongoing supports, these are various supports a participant may need to successfully maintain their job. So let's say now we've got you the job. You may need those ongoing supports. You may need someone on the job at the beginning to say, hey, we have to do this, we have to do this, organize. There are some times where people maybe say, hey, once I kind of get it for a week, let me do the repetition, then I have it. And then they're going to be, like I said, some people who, hey, you might need that support every day, and that is fine. So ongoing supports can follow someone along with their job and make sure everything's running smoothly. Then we have follow along supports. These are periodic supports after someone has transitioned into their job. As I previously stated, someone who, hey, no, you've been here with me maybe a week or two. I know what I'm doing. I'm kind of good. Now we can drop back and maybe we just have to do drop-in visits. So DDA pays for that as well. As I stated, we're going to pay for all of this, but these are the services that the providers that we work with offer. So I went over the day services. These are also meaningful day employment services. Normally, our day and employment services normally run around 9 to 3, normally in a day, but if someone has a job, their schedule may differ. So I will talk about, I get a lot of parents like, hey, if they're in the day program or even if they're in supportive employment, they normally run about 9 to 3. I'm not getting off work until 4 or 5. I know with the pandemic, things are different. There are some people who are at work. There are some people who are not. And normally families are like, they can't be home by themselves. If I'm not home and they get off at 3, what's happening? DDA also offers a plethora of what I call support services that can be tacked on to the day and employment services that I discussed before. Our main one that is normally done are the personal supports, which is in the second column. The personal supports is someone who could either meet your loved one at the day program or their job site, or meet them at home. And what they would do is to help them with, they could either take them into the community, they can work with them in the house to do organization, to maybe cook meals, things of that nature. Your loved ones, like when I say do community integration, your loved ones have to get haircuts. Maybe they want to get their nails done, or maybe they want to go to the movies and stuff. So DDA does not pay for the activities, but we will pay for the staff and the transportation to get them there. So, we want them to be as integrated with their community as possible. So that's personal supports. We also offer, like I said, we also offer a lot of different things, environmental assessments, environmental modifications. There are some people that maybe you need grab bars or ramps put in your house. After an assessment is done, DDA can pay for those things to be put in the house as well. So this is just a list of different services, support services that we offer that can definitely be tacked on to our day services. Now, if I explained all of those things and you don't feel like your loved one fits in any of those categories, like, I don't feel like they fit in any of those categories, DDA also offers self-directed services. So the self-directed service delivery model is an alternative to traditionally delivered and managed services. So you would actually be, the team would actually be the employer of record, and you can hire your own staff, you can fire your own staff. You would really build your day around your loved one. This is very beneficial. There are some times where there's people like, hey, you know, day programs and employment programs are normally running 9 to 3. My loved one, hey, if you get them up before 10 or 11, it might be a problem that day. That's fine. Self-directed services, you can build your day and start your day any way you want. So with self-directed services, you have access and capabilities to do all of the things on the traditional side, but you're just going to direct them yourselves on your side. You're going to hire your own staff. You're going to have to tell us how much you're paying them an hour, how many hours they're coming in a week, what they're doing. You're really going to build your own day under the self-directed service model. So like I said, you are the employer of record. So it's a little more time consuming, but it can be very beneficial if your loved one doesn't meet or doesn't like the traditional side of things. So those are our self-directed services. So really quickly, this is an approximate timeline of someone's transition year. Let's say it's your last year of school. Normally in the summer, so I'm going to use the people who are graduating in 2021. Let's say you have a loved one that is graduating in 2021. Normally the summer before the transition year, you visit providers. I understand due to the pandemic, things are different. So a lot of providers are doing Zoom meetings or they're doing phone calls and they're asking to send over the documentation and things like that. So providers are still accepting people and taking on to look at those, look at people. So normally in the fall, which is kind of where we're transitioning now, after you kind of visited providers or talk to providers, you will want to turn in your top 4 choices to your CCS. We definitely ask that you at least talk to, visit, whatever you want to do, 4 different providers. Why it's important is as you pick a provider, that provider also has to pick you. So we hate to see when someone only visits one provider, they love that provider, and they're like, nope, I'm just going to go with them. And then the provider comes back like, we actually didn't pick you for our services. And then the family has to start the entire process over again. It's like, okay, now I have to restart and visit people. So normally in the fall, you're going to turn that choice letter of your top 4 choices into your coordinator of community service, your CCS. Your CCS is going to follow up with the provider to see if you were accepted or not. If you didn't get into the first choice, they'll go to your second choice, but your CCS will keep you updated along the way. Normally about February or March, which is going to happen next year, we're going to enroll you into the waiver. Your CCS is going to come out and do that paperwork with you. These are Medicaid services. So we're going to enroll you into a waiver because they are Medicaid paid services. And your CCS will work with you and complete all that paperwork. And then about July 1st is the earliest start date for services. So even people who are graduating in May or June of 2021, July 1st is going to be the earliest that they can actually begin services. Okay, so there might be a little bit of a gap, but your CCS will work with that, work with you on that. DOORS is an excellent resource. I know you're going to hear from them, but normally DOORS definitely assists with that gap time until DDA services kick in. So I know I think we're doing questions in the Q&A. I just wanted to give you guys my information. If you have personal questions, maybe like, hey, I know I applied for DDA, but I don't know where I am, the status of it, or I don't know who my CCS is. You can definitely email me those questions. My email is there. Email is best because we're not in the office, so definitely don't call my direct line, but just shoot me an email and I can definitely assist with any questions you may have. Regarding if you don't know who your CCS is. If you do know who your CCS is and you have questions concerning the entire TY process, please go to your CCS first. They are your first point of contact. But like I said, if you don't know who your CCS is or you're not sure of your status with DDA, please shoot me an email and let me know so that I can assist you in that way. Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicole and Margie. I got all kinds of requests for more information and copies of all that information because it was such a huge download. The link is in the file to Margie's, the PDF of her presentation. And Nicole has 3 videos. She broke it down into 3 separate discussions in our YouTube gallery. And Rob has put that information in the chat as well. So we do want to make sure this isn't the only time you can get this information. And this webinar is being recorded and will be available within a few days on our YouTube channel. So you can listen to it all again for all the information that you couldn't catch. But there are a few questions. If you have a question, please put it in the Q&A. We have we have time for a couple of questions. And then any other questions that aren't answered, we're going to prepare an FAQ, and that will be sent to everybody who registered today. The first question, how long does it take to make a DDA determination once the application is received?
Good question. So normally to make a determination, once we receive your application, we will normally refer it out for the CA, the comprehensive assessment, within a week. So from that week, someone will call you probably about 7 days from when they receive it. They have a 7-day turnaround to call you to set up that interview. After the interview is done and they complete it, they do have 45 business days to get that back to us, and we will normally turn that around in about 30 days. So the entire process for when you submit your application, you're looking at about 45 to 50 business days for a complete turnaround. Even though the CCS have 45 days to complete it, they normally turn those around within 2 weeks. But you're looking at the entire process, you should have a letter within like 45 business days.
What is the youngest age you can apply for DDA? We've been talking about transition at 14, but how young were you? A person may well know that they could be eligible at some point. Can they apply much
Exactly. Great question. You can apply for DDA at any time. I have seen applications for 2-year-olds, but please note that if they're that young and you do not have the psychological or the documentation to show that they have an assessed need, you may be found not eligible at that time. So please note, if any of you are either found not eligible, or maybe we said we didn't have enough to make a determination, you do not have to reapply. All you have to do is send us updated documentation. So you can apply at any time, but I always let families know, please make sure you apply when you have documentation from medical professionals that show the need, because most medical professionals won't even diagnose before the age of 5. But as I said, I've also seen applications for 8-month-old, and I'm like, okay, we don't have anything to, so it's fine though. You can apply for DDA at any time.
And Montgomery County does have other services for that age as well. We're talking about the transition age for today. Are these services for Maryland residents only? And tied to that is another person who's now living in New Jersey or some other state and coming into Maryland. How do they start?
Okay, so even though these are federally funded services, it doesn't switch from state to state. So what I'm talking about is strictly for Maryland. If you're coming from a different state, I need you to apply for the services and let us make our determination. If you're someone who has already applied, you're on our waiting list, and because we're in this area, there are some times where families either move to DC or they move to Virginia, they don't transfer. You're gonna have to apply for their waiting list. We have the transitioning youth funding, but every state does not. So it's really going to depend on what state you go to. You might go to a different state and might be on the waiting list. But here, I have had families that have moved. They have services out there and they've moved out here, and maybe their loved one's only 20. And they're like, well, they're going to graduate next year. We'll apply because you're going to slip right in under our TY funding. But like I said, every state doesn't have it. But so this is strictly for Maryland.
What is the difference between the job support provided by DDA and DOORS? This person has a 21-year-old daughter in DOORS and waiting on a decision from DDA. And I will also note that some of the programs that you mentioned, Nicole, we have separate webinars coming up. DOORS will be at noon. The self-directed panel will be at 11:30. And everything you wanted to know about CCS agencies is at 2 o'clock. But right now, I'll let you.
Yeah, awesome. So I gave you guys a overview, but they're definitely going to go in depth. So that's great. So right. I will say the biggest difference between DDA and DOORS is strictly vocational, and they're looking for employment. And that's great. And that they do great work. DDA, we know that some people aren't going to be able to work and some people will never be able to work. So we provide those services for those people as well. Also, a big key difference, and you'll hear from DOORS, Normally doors, after they found you employment, if you're satisfactory on a job for about 90 days, they normally close your case because that is what doors are set up to do. We're set up to help you find a job. Once you're satisfactory for some time, we've done what we needed to do, we're done. With DDA, as long as you remain Medicaid eligible, our services are for life. So what that means is Medicaid eligible, you can never have assets or money more than $2,000. The person can't. So it's all about the person's income, not the family. It's all about the person's income. So as long as they remain Medicaid eligible, we are here with you for life. But DOORS is an amazing program, and we partner with them and work with them. But they're more, once you find that job, we're temporary. Even with DDA, if you find that job, we're still gonna be there to give you those supports and assists. Like I said, even if you don't need them daily, we'll kind of do the drop-in. We'll pay for the drop-in support and things like that. So we're just for life.
And we'll also say DOORS, also, you can enter DOORS and be a contractor and work with, be a client at DOORS at any age,
Yeah,
not
exactly.
in this transition window. If you get a job and things are going along fine, and then you're 30 and suddenly you've lost your job and you can't find it anymore, you can reapply for DOORS services if you need them in job coaching and those kinds of things. Another clarification, services will begin July 1st after the student turns 21, even if they graduated a year or two earlier?
Yes, so that's a good question. I get this question all the time. DDA goes based off of your school eligibility year. We are aware that there are some people that get diplomas or they come out, it is your right to come out 18, 19. That is fine, but we're still gonna start you on your eligibility year. So we have people like this all the time that are like, hey, I graduated actually 2 years ago, but it's like, oh, that's fine. But once your school eligibility, we're gonna wait for you to, because you can stay in school until 21. You're definitely on my list. As long as you're on the waiting list, I don't pull by when did they graduate, I pull by your birthday. So sometimes we have people that have been out of school for 3 or 4 years, and then we have people that are still in school. You will still qualify for the TY services.
Margie, you talked a lot about the decisions being made by the parents if they have the permission of the student or by the student, him or herself. What about guardianship? How does that change things, both in relationship to a college, if this person happens to be going to college, but in general, if the parents are guardians, how does that change some of the decision-making process?
If parents are guardians, then I know in terms of school, parents, while a student is in school, in MCPS, the parents maintain those educational rights. Even when a student turns 18, when they have that IEP, the parents maintain those educational rights through the age of 21. With guardianship in terms of college classes, I believe colleges would include the parents in the discussions and in what needs to be with disability support services. They would include the parents with that. But in terms of MCPS, parents maintain those educational rights through the age of 21. And in adult services, I believe, Nicole, if the parents have guardianship, then the parents are included in all of the decisions, correct?
Yeah, correct. So even if you don't have guardianship on the DDA world, because it's a team, you're still included. But what happens is when you do have guardianship, you definitely need to be at all meetings and you have to sign off on things in the DDA world if you have the guardianship.
We have a CCS question. Can you clarify CCS? Is it a person or an agency?
Oh, good question. So the CCS, the coordinators of community service, they're an agency. This is people we partner with, but at that agency, there are multiple people. So if you have applied for DDA and you're found eligible, you're gonna get your own case manager, but they're gonna work for a CCS agency. Please note though, it's not your own, it's gonna be your own personal, but they also have their own caseload. I get parents all the time like, well, they're not called. I was like, well, they have a whole caseload. So it's an agency that DDA has a contract with, and they do kind of like there are eyes and ears, but you're going to get your own case manager. So you're going to have an actual person to contact, not just calling the agency and speaking to multiple people.
And one question that certainly affects all parents, who would help our children navigate all this, especially DDA, even if they're accepted once the parents are gone?
So your CCS is the person that is going to help you with everything. Even when you're gone, they're always going to be there to make sure that your loved ones taken care of, make sure everything is going well. So even the parents, even if when you're not gone, I know it's a lot of information, but your CCS is there to help you navigate all these different things that I've talked about and to be able to tell you what's going on. So your CCS is normally your first point of contact to help you assist, to assist you through this whole process.
One last question. Is there any coordination between these Maryland services and Virginia and DC, particularly in our area where people can move back and forth, or you get a job in Virginia, you live in DC? Any sort of coordination for that?
So no, there's not. Every state has their own funding to do their own thing. We're actually like DDA here is done by Maryland Department of Health. I believe, I don't even know the agency, but I don't even think it's done by the health department in Virginia or in DC. Everybody's kind of, even though they're federally funded, everybody's doing their own thing and they have their own setup. So there's no correlation. So please note that if you're in Maryland and you're on my waiting list, and let's say your loved one's a TY and I'm like, let's work with getting you services. If you do move to Virginia, you're going to have to start their process all over. Or if you had services in Virginia and you come here and let's say you're out of the TY window, you're going to have to go on our waiting list because we just kind of have our own setup of how we do things. I'm sorry, but that's how it is.
One last question, because I think it's a quick answer. If the child is already under the autism waiver, can the child still apply for DDA?
Yes, you can. So please note that anyone who's on the autism waiver, or if you're on the waiting list, you can still apply for DDA because you're applying to be on my waiting list. Once you apply and you're found eligible, you'll be on our waiting list. And then what happens is when the autism waiver happens, we do this every year too. When the autism waiver shuts down on 6/30, that's why we pick up on July 1st. So we make sure all your documentation is in. Autism waiver normally after you graduate shuts down on June 30th. We come in July 1st. You can't be on two waivers at the same time, but we make sure if everything goes right, we make sure that we're the next day. So there's no lapse in services.
There's one follow-up question on this Maryland, Virginia, DC issue. If you're living in Maryland getting services from DDA, can you work in DC or Virginia?
Yeah, it doesn't matter where you work. It matters where that person lives. So, and I know we're in that area. So no, we're going to go by your home address. So you could be where we have some people that actually have Maryland addresses, but working in Pennsylvania. That's fine. As long as your loved one has a home address here and stays there, you can still get services. That's okay.
All right, great. Well, thank you both very much. You provided a wealth of information, and we have more than 100 participants. So a lot of people have heard what you've had to say. And as I say, in the links are a link to Margie's presentation, and Nicole has videos, and we'll be sending all that to you and in emails after the presentation. And so I thank you. Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
And now
Thank you,
we have
guys.